my name is Elisa and welcome back to my channel. Some of you know what I'm all about, which is I'm creating my dream wardrobe from scratch and I'm taking you along for the ride. In the past so far, I have tried to show you how to recreate the patterns that I make for yourself at home. I even have a bodice blog tutorial on my channel that I use to modify patterns to make different kinds of garments and dresses with. I know that this can be a lot. I know that pattern drafting doesn't come natural to everybody, and there's also a lot of things and tips and tricks to know about drafting patterns flat that eventually are gonna fit a 3D human body form. So it's not that easy. Even if somebody takes you along step by step, long story being short, pattern drafting is hard. And I know that from experience. A lot of you guys have asked me more than once if somehow I maybe could make my patterns available for you to purchase somewhere or to download. And I'm glad to say that now is that moment. I have finally taken the step of learning how to digitize and grade patterns, and let me tell you, it wasn't easy, but I went through it, and I'm so proud today to present to you my very first pattern design that is going to be available on my Etsy shop from today. Yeah. This might not seem like a big deal to you, but it is a big deal for me. This channel has been around for a while, and now looking back at my humble beginnings, I can't believe quite how far I've come in this time. And that is the moment for me to thank the people who actually helped me make this pattern a reality. I went on Instagram and asked my followers for volunteers to actually test the pattern before I release it today. So thank you very much to my Ophelia testers. Without you, wouldn't be here either. That's everything I needed to say. Now let's talk about the dress. As I've just hinted at, this is called the Ophelia Dress, and she comes in two views, meaning there are two different kinds of dresses that you can make with this pattern. The first one is an A-line mini version of the dress, which is also the pattern that, if you decide to purchase it on my Etsy shop, is on the PDF. And then there's view B, which looks a little bit more like the original version of the dress, which I'm going to talk about in a sec, which comes with a flowy, drapey, midi length skirt. For that one, the skirt isn't on the pattern PDF, but there's a tutorial on how to draft a half circle skirt. Now, some of you might recognize this design. This is actually from way back in 2021 when I first started my YouTube channel. I think this must be featured in my 5th or 6th video or so. And this is, to this day, one of the most popular dresses I've made on this channel, so I decided why not go for this one for my very first Etsy shop pattern. So the process of this was basically that I found somehow the old paper pattern version of this dress that I kept, and I overhauled it. I redesigned it with all of the knowledge that I now have about pattern drafting, which is a lot more than back then. So I improved and tweaked it in a lot of areas. And then, as I mentioned, I sent it to my pattern testers so you can be sure that what you buy on Etsy actually works. I'm very proud of this. So today I'm going to show you how to sew this together, starting with view A, the A-line mini version. So let's go. I'm going to use this beautiful Liberty cotton Tana or Tana cotton that I bought back in January. So I've been waiting for a worthy project for this, and I think now is the moment. So let's jump straight in. So this is how the pattern pieces are placed on my fabric. I needed to pay attention to how the print on my Liberty cotton is placed. You can see that the flowers all have a direction, so they're looking up like this. So I had to pay attention to how I place my pattern pieces. Something neat and nifty that I decided to do is, in my print PDF, to make it easier for you to place all of your A4 pieces of paper together, I have numbers in the corners of the pages that need to look together. So we have 777 here. Here we have 999. So you can be a bit quicker when you print the pattern at home and then have to tape it together. I know that that can be a bit time consuming sometimes, and hopefully this will be a bit faster this way. Something you want to pay attention to in the cutting process is that you add 1 or 2 centimeters of seam allowance around your pattern at all times, because seam allowance is not included in the pattern. And then something that will be handy during the sewing process is if you add notches to the important points of your pattern right away. So that would be, for example, for the front skirt, to add notches for the 2 arms of your dart, like this, so you can easily identify it. And then also add a little notch for your center front, like this. And you do that for all of your pattern pieces. Alright, all of my pattern pieces are now cut, and there are two ways as to how you can go about finishing the dress. If you have a cotton or any other kind of fabric that is not see-through, you don't necessarily have to line the dress. You can just go ahead and create facing just for the neckline, and that finishes your dress from the outside, and all of your inside seams you just serge and you're good. However, my cotton is quite see-through, so I probably want to line it. For that, I have this polyester crepe right here, chiffon probably. It's more a chiffon than a crepe. So I'm gonna go ahead and place this on the floor, and then place all of my cotton pieces with the pattern on top of that, and then I'm going to try to be as exact as possible, just replicating all of these pieces in the lining. So that's the plan. Alright, so I took a tea break after cutting all of my pieces because cutting pattern pieces is a lot of work if you ask me. I also did my nails because as a DIY YouTuber you have to have good nails at all times because you guys have to look at them the entire video. So here they are. And now I'm going to show you how to sew together Ophelia View A. So let's go. I'm going to start with my shell, and the first thing I'm going to do is to sew in all of my darts in the entirety of all of my dress pieces, starting with the shoulder darts followed by the skirt. So let's go. What I like doing is I remove the paper pattern and place one pin exactly where the end of the dart is and just go all the way through both layers of fabric like this. I grab an erasable gel pen. This one comes off during the ironing process or when you wash your piece. Because my right side is on the outside, I'm opening the two layers and then I'm marking the point where the needle comes through like this, so I know exactly where I want my dart to end, and then I sew my darts in. In the skirt, we have two darts in the back on each side and one dart in the front on each side. I'm going to start with the front. Now that the darts in the skirt are in, we can actually go ahead and sew together the center back seam. So I'm placing the two back skirt pieces right sides touching. And now we're going to sew down the center back seam. So what I did here actually is that I sewed together the center back up until this notch here in a 2.5 stitch length or whatever stitch length you're using to sew your entire project. And from that point on, from this notch point, because this is the end of our zip, I continued the seam with a basting stitch of a stitch length of 5, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my iron and I'm going to iron all of these pieces where I just sewn in all of the darts, and I'm going to open up this back seam and then I'm going to iron it like this. So this seam helps me to keep an even distance with the seam allowance in the back, and then I'm going to open up this later. So let's go to our iron. So, did you know that the most valued possession, the MVP of your sewing process, is actually your iron? If you don't iron your darts and seams along the way, what are you even doing? It's what makes a difference, really. I have to say, I hated ironing my stuff while I was sewing in the past, but I've just come to learn that it's really what makes the difference. And if you live in a small space like me, you can do this on your bed. Like literally. Because I don't have an ironing board. So, whatever. Before we continue with our bodice, we are going to fix up our skirt real quick. So this is what our back piece looks like right now. Darts are in, center back is sewn together, and the darts in the front are in too. So we can now place the front and back of the skirt right sides touching, pin down the side seams, and sew them. Okay, so the skirt is finished, it looks something like this. We have the front side and the back side is open up until where the zip is gonna end eventually. You just repeat all of the same steps for your lining if you choose to line your dress. And now we can move on with our top. I'm going to start with the back. I'm gonna place them so that the right side is facing up and the center is looking towards each other. Then we have this piece, which is called back bodice 2. Now in the design, you can see that the bodice of Ophelia has a sort of like corseted effect, meaning the waist is quite taken in. So we have a taken in waist area in the front and in the back. So this is the back side. I'm removing all of my paper pieces as per usual. The piece is gonna go on like this, right? So I'm placing it here, flipping it up, and I'm making sure that the center back is aligned like this. Now you can see that the back is like the seams are moving away from each other, and that is on purpose because this is technically a dart. So we're gonna start by turning this around, and I'm going to pin starting from the center back, and then as I move along, I'm pulling the back bodice 2 piece towards the other seam. So eventually when we sew this, this is gonna be a bit curved and make space for our back. And now I'm sewing these seams. Once our back pieces look like this, we can put them to the side and continue with the front. So the front bodice also has 2 pieces called front bodice 1 and front bodice 2. We're gonna start with the top, so front bodice 1. I'm gonna remove the paper pattern, and once we open this, it looks a little something like this. Now you have your notches here, which are important. Once we grab the front bodice 2 piece, you will see why. I open this as well, and when I match the center front notch up, you can see that the top is much wider than the bottom, and that is because our darts, instead of us sewing them in, we're gonna gather them up because that's gonna give us a nice lifted effect in the bust area. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm going to make sure that my 2 pieces are right sides facing, and I'm gonna start by pinning together the center front notch as well as the sides. Once these 3 points are pinned together, we can continue by pinning the pieces from the sides towards the center front. And we're gonna do that until we meet our first bust notch. So I just met this first notch in the upper piece here. Same thing on the other side. Now we have something looking like this, and there's a lot of ease that we need to pin away. So starting from the center front, I'm gonna pin the 2 pieces together flat once again until I meet that second notch. Once that is done, we have something looking like this. And now we can start to pin this down in a ruffled way. So we're gonna ruffle this and pin it. You can do this by hand, but what you could also do is to sew a basting stitch from notch to notch and then just pull your seams together it up that way. This is really up to you. Point is, gather the dart. Okay, now when we open this up and look at it from the right side, you can see that the bust is gathered and the pieces match up, and this is what you want. Now you just sew this seam. And now what we have is this beautiful front bodice, and we can already see the dress taking shape. To complete the assembly of the upper bodice, what we're going to do is to grab our back pieces and place them right sides touching with the front. I'm going to start by pinning together the shoulders. Once the shoulders are pinned, we can move on to the side seams. And here the important point is to make sure that our underbust seam in the front and back are matching up, so we have a clean look on our sides. Okay, now we sew our shoulders as well as our sides. All right, so this is what our top looks like now. And I also just tried it on, and it fits perfectly for a size medium, which I am. I would recommend you to try on the piece at this point as well to check if it's a little bit too big or too small. The thing with making any pattern really is that different kinds of fabrics behave differently. So if you go for a cotton like me, it is most likely that the pattern will fit you depending on what size you are. If you go for something a little bit more flexible, like a satin or a crepe or something like this, the pattern pieces might warp a little bit. Or if you cut something on the bias, then, you know, it might become wider. So it is important to try the piece at different steps in the process, and this is one of them. However, since this fits me perfectly, we can now move on to join the skirt with the top. For that, I'm placing both in front of me like so that the right sides are facing out, and I'm finding the center point notch for the waist, both in my top and in my skirt. Now I'm gonna flip the top over like this, so the right sides are touching, and I'm gonna pin both together, starting from the center point notch. Next up, I'm gonna find my side seams, and I'm gonna make sure these match up perfectly as well. And what you want to do is that your seam allowances always look in the same direction. So for me, that's always towards the back. Okay, once this is pinned together, you can go and sew it. I've prepared the sleeve in two ways now. First of all, I serged this corner down here, which is when it's open, looks like this. And then I took it to my iron and pressed the cuff up by 5 centimeters like this. The second thing I did is I added a basting stitch to my shoulder curve from this notch to this notch, basically just setting my machine to 5 and sewing all the way over here so we can use this to gather up the shoulder. But first we're going to insert an elastic here, and I need to add one normal stitch up here and then a second one 1 centimeter below that so we can create a tunnel for the elastic. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do to finish off our sleeves is to grab some 1 centimeter elastic and wrap it around our upper arm, something like this, to see how much we need. And you don't want to make this too tight, otherwise it's going to be uncomfortable for you. So give it a little bit more than you think you need, and cut it. And then grab that piece you just cut and cut another one from your stash. Now that we've got these two pieces, we can fill them into the tunnel we just created. Alright, so our shell looks a little bit something like this right now. Pretty good. And this is the state of our sleeves. In a few seconds, which is tomorrow for me because it's currently 6 o'clock on a Sunday and I'm going to call it a day, I'm going to show you how to insert these sleeves into the shell, and then I'm going to show you how to connect your lining with your shell. So see you in a bit. Alright, it's a couple days later. The shell still looks a little bit something like this. However, I did go ahead and sew together my lining off camera because the lining is the exact same piece as the shell. I just shortened the skirt a little bit, and now I'm going to show you how to sew lining and shell together. First thing I'll do is I'll place the shell in front of me so that the right side of the front is facing up and facing me. And then I'm grabbing my lining, and I'll make sure that the right side of the lining faces the right side of the shell. And that is because we want to hide all of our raw seams towards each other, so we have a beautiful inside as well as a beautiful outside. So now it's important to find the center front notch in your neckline, and this is where we're going to start. So I'm aligning these two notches, both in shell and lining, and I'm placing a first pin. The next pin I'm placing is the shoulder seam, and then I'm pulling these two pins away from each other and trying to line up lining and shell like this, and I'm placing another pin in the middle. And now I'm doing the same thing on the other side, again lining up the shoulder seams and then pulling, lining up the edges and placing a pin in the middle. When we're sewing, we're just going to add a bit of tension here so things are lining up nicely. And then I'm just doing the same thing in the back, and here things match up perfectly as well. You might have a notch for your center back, make sure you align that as well. Now I'll go ahead and sew all the way around the neckline from center back to center back. Okay, now that I've sewn this, I'm gonna go ahead and knit the seam allowance in the curved areas because that's going to help the neckline to lie more flat once everything's turned around. And I'm also doing it in the back. And because both my shell and my lining are rather see-through, I'm going to cut back the seam allowance a little bit just for a neat look in case something does shine through. Okay, and now before I turn it right sides around, I'm going to separate the lining into shell like this, and then I'm going to understitch the seam allowance into my lining. And now to our MVP, the iron. And here we go. The lining is in the dress. And we have a beautiful neckline that looks something like this. And now we can continue with the sleeves. You remember the sleeves look like this right now. There are different options as to how you can finish the sleeves. This is one option where you press up 5 centimeters plus whatever your seam allowance was, and then you create a 1 centimeter tunnel here for your elastic. You could also opt to not create this ruffled cuff and just leave the cuff at its original length, just overturning your seam allowance and creating a tunnel for the elastic there, as I did with my midi version of my dress. But for this one, I chose this ruffled cuff because I think it looks cute and whimsical with the floral print. So as you remember, I've prepared them also so that there is a basting stitch along my shoulder curve between the 2 notches that I created. And now I'm going to place them in my armhole, starting with the right one over here. Now what I need to pay attention to is that I don't only catch the shell when I'm pinning in my sleeves, but also my lining. So I'm going ahead and pinning the side seams of lining, shell, and sleeve together like this. So the way you gather the shoulder is really up to you. You can either do a basting stitch like I do here and then ruffle your shoulder section, or you can pin in pleats like I did with my midi dress. Okay, so I've reached my first notch, and now I'm reaching into the dress like so, pulling the inside out, because now it's easier from this side to continue pinning. Now that I've reached a notch here on this other side, we can see that there is loads of ease here that we need to gather down. And I'm going to do it from both sides. So I'm going to pin the notch in my shoulder curve in my sleeve onto my shoulder seam so we can make sure things are even. And then I'm grabbing one thread on one end and start to gather up what's on this side until it fits the distance I have. Same procedure on the other side. Okay, and when we look at it from the outside, this is what we've got. Looks pretty neat. And I'm going to repeat the pinning process on the other side, and then I'm going to sew both sleeves in. All right, so the sleeves are in, the lining is in, as you can see from this side. And I also went ahead and serged / overlocked the raw edges of my hem. So I can now try the dress to see how long I eventually want it to be. And I'm going to finish my hem by using hemming web and just pressing it up, because I think that gives it the most clean look from the outside. And then we can actually insert the zip and we're done. Now finally we're moving on to the last step, which is installing our zipper. So what I'm doing is I'll grab an invisible zipper that is a good length. It should definitely cross your waist, your narrowest point, and then go into your skirt. I wasn't able to grab anything longer than this. This is about 56 centimeters. I think 65 would be even better, so I can get into the dress stepping into it. This way I'll probably have to slide it over my head, but that's fine. I'm practically just placing the zipper face down onto one side first. And what I also do is I make sure that I fold the end of the zipper up here away so the dress zips all the way up. Now I'm going to go ahead and pin one side in. Now I can open the zip and place this side into my sewing machine, trying to sew as closely to the teeth of the zip as possible. Okay, so once one side is sewn in, we can do the same thing on the other side, and we need to make sure that things are matching up. So now the zip is in, and the last thing to do is to take your piece and then turning your lining all the way around so the right sides are facing once again. And now we're going to pin all the way down along the zip. so for this midi version of the dress, I have this piece of fabric here that I think is roughly 1.50 meters in width. So we have a selvage up here and we have a selvage on the bottom. Now what I'm gonna do is I'll fold it like this to get a nice big piece for my half circle skirt. I'm gonna place that on the floor. The pattern comes with this handy little piece of paper here that has a half circle skirt tutorial on it. So if you've never done one, you're in luck because the pattern comes with this little cheat sheet. So basically it tells you the calculation of how to draft this half circle skirt, and it's really simple. It's not a secret, so I'm going to tell you. So you place the fabric on a fold like I did, and then you need to calculate a radius. Then you can use your tape measure with and then pivot from this corner point up here to create a curve that eventually when you open it up is going to be the circumference of your waist. So the way you do this is you need to calculate your radius by taking half of your waist circumference. So say for example for size medium, your waist circumference is 72. So you halve that and you get 36. And then you take this number 36 and you divide it by p or pi, and then you get the radius that you need. So I take the 23 with one hand, place it into this corner, and where the end of my tape measure lands, I'm gonna place a needle, and then I'm gonna just go all the way around like this. And then once I've done that and I measure this curve here, I end up with 36 centimeters exactly. And when I double that, I get 72, which is the circumference of my waist. Now, what I need to do is I need to keep in mind that I need to account for some ease because I have a zip in the back and all of those things. So I'm gonna cut about 1 centimeter below where I placed my pins. And then the next thing you do is you want to create a second radius for your hem. So you take the first measurement that you calculated, so that was 23 for me, and you add your total skirt width. So I want to make the skirt about 105 centimeters long, so I'm going to add that to the 23, which then gives me 128 centimeters. I find 128 on my tape measure, and then I just go ahead, place it here, stretch it all the way down here, and go all the way around like a compass to create that skirt. Okay, so now we have a beautifully flowy skirt that has a really nice length that I can play with, and it has the exact circumference that I need. But now, because we have a seam in the center back, I need to take one of these pieces and actually fold it in half and cut down the center back. Because I want a slit in my front skirt, I'm gonna go ahead and fold the front piece in half as well. And then I fold half of that half one more time over like this, if I can. And the idea is that this fold line is going to become my slit. So very carefully, I'm gonna grab my scissors and I'm gonna cut up this fold line, but not all the way. That's about it. And now this front skirt has a slit.
Can you feel it, honey? Can you feel it, honey? Now you're way past that. All that bad, 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 bad. So bad, 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 bad. Can you see it, honey? Can you see it? See you past the trouble. Now you know the meaning of it all, it all. Didn't think it happened so soon, but then one afternoon you finally moved on, letting go of all that he said and finally cared for yourself. You really moved on, and I feel it, feel it, feel it, feel it. I feel it, I feel it. Ooh, it's gonna be the ending of all that's babe. From now on, let's just leave it all in the past. to the feeling.